How important is float adjustment and bottom detection in wild fishing? Veteran anglers rely on these three details. There has always been a debate in the fishing community: is float adjustment really that important in wild fishing? Some anglers believe that fish activity is what truly counts. No matter how precisely you adjust the float, it's useless if there are no fish. If fish are abundant, you can still catch plenty even without adjusting the float. This sounds somewhat reasonable, but is that really the case? Today, let's have a thorough talk about float adjustment in wild fishing. 1. Inaccurate bottom detection is like a blind man groping for an elephant. In wild fishing, the underwater situation is extremely complex, unlike the flat and clean bottoms of fish ponds. A few days ago, a fellow angler told me that even after years of wild fishing, he still doesn't understand the role of precise bottom detection in float adjustment. I explained to him that in wild waters, unless you get into the water yourself, it's hard to fully figure out the situation even with an underwater camera. That's why precise bottom detection is particularly important. Precise bottom detection helps us determine if there is silt, loose rocks, aquatic plants, or cracks underwater, and most importantly, the water depth. Without precise bottom detection and knowledge of the underwater terrain, line tangles and snags will become common occurrences. Although there are places with good underwater conditions, they are few and far between after all. Moreover, another key role of precise bottom detection is to help us judge whether a spot is suitable for gathering fish before setting up a bait nest. Spots like slope bottoms, silt bottoms, rocky bottoms, aquatic plant bottoms, cracked bottoms, and those with excessively large height differences are not ideal for setting up a bait nest. Fish may not come to these places, and even if they do, it will be hard to catch them. Therefore, precise bottom detection is the first and crucial step in float adjustment for wild fishing. If this step isn't done well, all subsequent efforts will be in vain. 2. Failing to fine-tune in actual fishing means missing opportunities for a good catch. Many anglers have a bad habit: after setting up the bait nest, they adjust the float once and then fish until they pack up without moving the float at all. They think wild fishing doesn't require such precise float adjustment, but fish activity is constantly changing. From initially having no fish in the bait nest, to fish gathering later, the bait gradually decreasing, then replenishing the bait, spooking fish, losing fish, and finally the bait nest dispersing with no fish left. Fish activity is constantly changing throughout the process, and even the underwater terrain of the bait nest and fishing spot may change. How can the float stay unchanged? For example, when there are many fish and the biting rate is fast, you should promptly switch to a sensitive setup. Tighten the leader line so that the upper hook is off the bottom and the lower hook touches the bottom, making it easier for fish to eat the bait. When the biting rate slows down, you need to adjust to a dull setup in time, replenish the bait at the same time, reduce the frequency of casting, let more fish gather in the bait nest, and continue fishing when the fish density increases. But some anglers only think of fine-tuning their tackle when small fish are disturbing the bait nest, which is too passive and causes them to miss many good opportunities to catch fish. 3. Sticking to unchanged adjustment strategies makes it hard to catch fish, like waiting for a rabbit by a stump. Fine-tuning and changing adjustment strategies are not the same thing. Fish activity is variable, so our fishing methods must change accordingly. Take midsummer now, for example. The weather is hot, fish may rise due to lack of oxygen at the bottom, or they may be forced to rise because we cast frequently and the bait dissolves too quickly. At this time, the adjustment strategies for bottom fishing and float fishing must change significantly. Not only the visible float segments but also the adjusted segments need to be reconfigured. If you still stick to the old strategy of only fishing the bottom while the fish are not at the bottom, how can you catch them? Some anglers may say that adjusting the float every time takes a lot of time, but is it necessary? In fact, even if you start from rough bottom detection to readjust the float, it takes less than 5 minutes if you're skilled. If you already know the water depth and underwater terrain, the adjustment can be done in as fast as 3 minutes. So don't make excuses for yourself, adjust when you need to. After saying so much, let's go back to the initial question: why adjust the float for wild fishing? Because we can't see underwater and can only judge the situation through the float. Why precise float adjustment? Because wild fish activity is complex and there aren't many fish, only with precise float adjustment can we increase the chance of hooking fish. If there were as many fish in the river as in a fish farm, you could indeed catch a lot without adjusting the float, but reality isn't that ideal. We can only honestly adjust the float well to improve the success rate of fishing. Therefore, precise float adjustment is really necessary for wild fishing. Don't underestimate it anymore, spend more effort on float adjustment, and maybe your catch will be very different next time you go fishing. About the author: I'm a fishing enthusiast and a self-media blogger who loves sharing. Follow me, and we'll exchange fishing skills and discuss the little details of wild fishing together. Give a like, save, and follow to never miss future updates.